Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Art After Hours. I'm Shauna Robeson with Creating Space Coastal, and in this video, we are going to be working on a mandala color emotion wheel. Now, we're not going to do the color yet. We just created the wheel, and then next month is color month, so we're going to be doing our coloring the color wheel next month, so stay tuned for that. But we worked on creating an emotion. I don't know if you can see it. There we go. An emotion mandala, and then we'll be doing the coloring next time. So hope you join us for both. Let's get started. All right, so tonight we're going to be working on creating a mandala that we will be coloring. So a color wheel basically, but also we're going to be creating an emotion wheel related to those colors if you're up for that part. And I just do want to say again, this is from this color wheel that I'm using for inspiration is the Plutchik emotion wheel. And he tied in emotions and colors, which I thought was great. He also had opposing emotions across the wheel. So it's kind of like how we create a color wheel. We have the colors that are across each other, the complementary colors or opposite colors. And then we have the secondary colors. When you mix two colors, you get a secondary color from that. And that's how this is created. And this particular version of it, which is from therapista.com, is a little bit easier to read. So I will, I think I'll, maybe I'll post a picture of this. I'm trying to think of where I can put that for you guys. Or you guys, if you want to take a screenshot of that, or you can search therapista.com Wheel of Emotions, and you'll be able to see that. That way, if you want to use these same emotions. But how this wheel works is the word that's in this middle rung, if you will, of the circles, that's the primary emotion. And then if it's closer to the center, that means it's the more intense version of that emotion. So, and then if it's out away from the center, it's a softer or less intense version of that same emotion. So for example, for joy, a lighter version would be serenity and a more intense version would be ecstasy. And then if you combine two neighboring emotions, for example, here in this case, it'd be joy plus trust, that equals the secondary emotion, which would be love. So that's how to read this wheel. And again, this is just another version. It's just a little harder to see because some of the font is really small and sometimes it's light on light and it's just hard to see. So but I do like this shape, so I might follow the shape of this mandala a little bit in mine, but you can create your own as long as you have the eight sections. Okay, and so this is an example of a watercolor color wheel, and I do recommend, especially when you're working with transparent mediums like watercolor or colored pencils, to create a color wheel so you can see how your particular medium does mix to create colors, because you may not realize, oh, if I mix this with this cadmium red plus phthalo blue, I'm going to get this color. It might not look like you would, but then you end up seeing these colors that you get that you wouldn't realize. Now this is more colors than we're going to be using here, but I wanted you guys to just understand kind of where we're headed. I do recommend using color wheels for coloring, and we're going to be talking more about that in next month's workshops because it's color themed. Now, to create a mandala, we always start with creating the guide, and the guide is basically that gridded circle. Let me just show you an example for those of you who are new and have not seen the intro. It just basically looks like this. Now the guide is going to be in pencil, and that's just going to help you in placing your designs. So we're going to be creating that. Now it's not going to be quite as busy as this one because I'm not going to cut it up in that many pieces. mine's going to only be, I'm going to use 8 segments. So in order to do that, the first thing I do is decide how many pieces I want. If I know, I'm going to decide how many pieces I want it to be. And if there's a little bit of math involved, if you want to do it this way, but basically a circle is 360 degrees. So you're basically dividing those degrees. And if you have one of the round protractors, you can see the degree marks on there. This one is a half version, and you'll see 0 to 180. And you only need a half version. You don't have to have the full circle one. I'll use this one this time since I used the other one last time. But basically, so 360 degrees, if I divide that into 8 sections, because I want to divide up my circle into 8. So I'm going to just divide that by 8. I get 45. And what that means is that each of my pie sections are going to be 45 degrees. So I want to just be aware of that when I'm creating my crosshairs. And what I mean by that are these sections that go through, I want to have them at 45 degrees from the center. So that's my goal, is to have them be that. And so the first thing I'm going to do is create a starting point. Now I also know that I want my mandala to be divided up into, so I'm thinking about the rungs that I want. First I was thinking about the pieces like this. Now I'm thinking about the rings. So I'm going to have the center ring, and then I want to have 3 rungs beyond that. Now I could have these, I could put this one in the center, but I think I'm going to leave the center open. I like how that is. And then 3 rungs that for each of my emotion gradients. And then I'm going to have a section in the middle that will be my combined secondary emotions. So I'm just kind of keeping an eye on how I want to design it. Now I want this kind of in the center, so I'm just going to measure that out. I'm just looking at the size of my paper. Oops, I'm not using centimeters. So it's about 5.5. So 2 3/4 is kind of my center of the paper, because there's a perforation here, so I'm not starting there. So I'm just putting my center dot in. Let's bring this closer so you guys can see my center dot, just placing that. So that's my starting point. And now from that, I can place my crosshairs of my protractor. In this case, it's this part right here. Now, if I was using the round one, it would be the center of those crosshairs. Okay. So I'm going to just put that right in that dot. And now I'm going to mark off my 45 increments. So I'm going to start at the easy ones. So 0. Now I don't have to mark the opposing side, because once I have the dot in the middle plus 1 out here, that's 2 points. I can make a line, and I can make the line all the way through. That's why you only need a half. So I'm going to mark the 180. That's kind of these are my main crosshairs. And then if I just go to 45 degrees, and then 45 plus 45 is 90, and then the middle in between those two. And actually this one measures back the opposite way, so I can go to 45 there. Okay, so now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 points, and I can just draw them out from the center point to the mark that I made. I'll start with this one. Now, these are just lightly drawn. You don't want to draw them too dark because you're going to be erasing these points. Now, when I do the marks, I'm going to draw them all the way through because I want to make sure that they're big enough to cover my whole mandala. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have my 8 points. And these points, if I'm looking at my inspiration, are these points. So this is basically where the line is at each of these points. Now I want to mark my rings. I want a center ring, and then I want 1, 2, 3 from there. So basically 4. So I decide how big do I want them to be, how much space between them. So I'm just going to think about that given the size of space that I have. And I have about I think if I make this one, I do 1.5 times 4. Let's see. That's 6. I have 7 centimeters. If I'm measuring 7 centimeters. So if I divide that up by 4, that's 1.5 centimeters. 7 divided by 4 segments. That's 1.75. So basically 1.5 centimeters can be each space. So I'm just going to mark that here. I hope that makes sense. Now, normally you don't have to do math if you're just doing something generic, but since I'm making a specific thing with something in mind, I'm following, more precise. Okay. Now I want to make sure that I don't put a hole in my other paper behind. And since this does have a sharp tip, I want to make sure to put something underneath there. So I'm just going to get a cutting board to lay under so that I don't put a hole in my table or my paper pad underneath. So just something to protect the surface underneath while I'm using the compass, because this will put a hole in your paper. So I'm going to put that right in the center. And then if I go to, let me see if I can get a better angle here so you can see what I'm doing. If I just put my point there, and then I'm going to adjust. Let me see if I can, I want you guys to see what I'm doing. I need a cameraman. All right, so I'm going to adjust this wheel. This one has a wheel, but you're going to adjust just till you get to the mark where you want it. Okay. And I always end up making the camera it's hard because my hand's in the way. So I do the same thing. I'm just going to open this up until it gets to the next rung that I measured out. All right, and then there's my guide. Now I do like this little flower version, but maybe I want it to be a little bit different shape. I'm just going to put this here. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just do it in pencil first. Sometimes I might start with a marker if I'm ready, but if I want to make sure that I get the design that I want, then I use a pencil first and then I go over it with my permanent marker. I'm not going to be doing my words in the center. I'm going to just do a design in there, like this one is open. So I think I'm going to I'm going to leave that like that for now. And then I'm going to start at this rung and go from this point. And that's how we do it. We kind of do a dot to dot. So going from this guide point to this point. And I can do any shape I want. If I want it to be kind of an S curve, or I can just do an arc like it is here. So I'm just going to do that. You can even do a straight line if you want to use a ruler, you can. And then I'm going to do just a little S curve kind of for a little petal. And the nice thing about doing this first in pencil is that, you know, like I don't particularly like that. That's okay. I can, maybe I like this other one. I can redo it before I use a marker, or I can just change it when I do the marker. So it's nice when you're, you know, if you care about making a mistake, if you really want it to be precise. Sometimes I just don't care. I just say, oh, we'll just see what happens and let it be. Start drawing in with my marker, and I'm going to use this. I'm using the Micron, but they're the Sakura color. Yeah, Sakura. Sometimes it's easier if you're making a certain line shape to continue with that same direction, just rotate around instead of doing that one and then this one, because it's a different movement. Then sometimes you get a little bit more consistent with your lines. Now, while I still have those guidelines, because I think I do want to have them go out radially. So, and I'm going to follow the order of that they did it here. So if you want to do, now in creating a color wheel, it is important where the colors lie because these are mixed together and they follow the rainbow colors. So there's a kind of an order of operation of primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. So it is kind of important where the colors are. So if you are doing something different with emotions, like different emotions, it might not follow this particular, you know, if you're saying, oh, okay, I want my green to be this, it might be a little bit different, but I'm just going to follow this guide. And just as a reminder, I know that sometimes we get stuck in feeling like emotions, there's good emotions and bad emotions, right? Because some are more comfortable to feel. It's more comfortable to feel joy than it is to feel disgust. but all emotions have a function. They drive action. They drive our behavior, sometimes in good ways and sometimes not so good ways. I mean, that's where we have to decide whether or not the action urge, what we're tempted to do, is going to help or hurt the situation for us. Okay, so then they have between disgust and anger, because this next one that is coming up is anger, and that is in the red in this particular wheel. So it's up to us to decide, okay, is the action that this particular emotion is encouraging me, is urging me to do, is that going to help me or help the situation, or is that going to hurt the situation? And then we have the control to say, okay, we get to decide what we do about it. But we need emotions because we need to take action sometimes, whether it's fight or flight or freeze, or to help someone, to protect someone. I mean, we need to have those catalysts for that. Sometimes sadness takes us all the way down and says, okay, we need a break. We need a break from, we need to take a little vacation from what life's thrown at us. But we need that. Our bodies need to rest and rejuvenate. So sometimes sadness forces us in some ways to do that. So, okay, aggression is the secondary between anticipation and anger. All right, so this next one is, the primary is anticipation.
I'm sorry, Shauna. What's the last word in the petal before aggression?
This one is annoyance.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Never say sorry. You never have to apologize for asking a question. Okay, let's see, aggression. So this one is anticipation, or I'm sorry, vigilance is in the middle. So yeah, emotions are survival skills. I mean, they're survival instincts that help us. So it's important not to judge these emotions because they're natural, regardless of whether you see them as negative or positive. They're part of what we need. Just don't let them trap you. Don't get stuck in them. Use them, accept them, move through them, let yourself feel the emotions. It's very important for us to let ourselves feel the emotions. We get to decide our behavior. And regardless of what we want to do, sometimes we feel a lot of guilt around, and that's an emotion, that's a feeling too. That's an emotion too, right? Guilt. And sometimes we feel, oops, I missed a spot here. Let's see. Between, let's see, anticipation and joy is optimism. When we try to stunt our feelings, when we try to block our feelings, we have to remember that we block all feelings, not just the sad ones, not just the ones that we don't like and that aren't comfortable. So it's healthier to allow ourselves to feel it, to move through it, and then to get to the other side, so that we've allowed ourselves to process them and they don't get stuck in our subconscious. Now, art is a great way of working out a lot of what we have that gets trapped in our subconscious. But it's healthy to acknowledge your feelings. They are all valid, because they are just part of how we are wired as humans, even when they may not be justified. And by that, I mean that maybe your emotion reaction, which has a lot to do with the filters of your life, your experiences, may not be aligned with what the situation is. And so your urge might be more, let's say, just more extreme than what the situation might warrant, maybe due to some trauma that you've had in the past or something like that. So it's up to us to use our wise mind to say, okay, this is the emotion that I'm feeling. Is the amount of feeling that I have in line with what the situation is, and what can I do about it that is healthy and functional and will help me rather than cause more problems? Because if you can't at least make something better, at least don't make it worse. That's a good rule of thumb. And oftentimes our action urges, especially if we've encountered a similar trauma repeatedly, like those microaggressions, sometimes our reaction can be more intense. We can feel more this level, even though maybe the situation warrants maybe this level or even this level, but because of our history or experience and our filters, we feel it stronger. So it's up to us to use the rational side to balance out that emotional side so that we can decide how to move forward, how to process through the feelings, but then move forward in what we do, our behavior, our actions, how we problem solve. But if we go fully into just the emotion side, if we don't balance it out, then we may react rather than have action or problem solve. And so we have to move past that intense emotion so that we can get to the place where we can problem solve. We have to get to a calm space. Get closer. There you go. And now I just would go through and clean up lines. So let's say, like, this has a little messiness there. So all I would do is go in and maybe with a thicker marker and just make that a thicker line. So just clean it up a little bit. Wherever it needs. You can add more design, more patterns, fill in. Just this is where you do the final touches. And the magic of mandalas is how once you've finished a design, all of those little imperfections and mishaps you might have felt along the way, you might, those oopsies, they just fade away in the design. Because the design becomes a whole, and then you don't notice all those little oopsies along the way when you look at it, when you stand back and look at it. All right, we are at 8:38, and I want to make sure that we have time for show and tell for anybody who's interested. So I'm going to go ahead and pause and get to that. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Healing Art After Hours. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you find this content helpful. Thank you so much. And as always, happy creating. Bye.